Hi everyone, my name is Piana and welcome to my video. So, the Oksa Pollock Book 3 rant review is long overdue, and the reason for that is I've only got about halfway through it because, well, my brain started dribbling out of my ears. Reading these books takes so much out of me, but I have a kind of morbid curiosity about them. I want to know how bad this is going to get, because I had expectations for book 2. I was very indulgent with book 1 because I was like, well, these authors clearly have never written anything before and they don't know what they're doing. I still can't believe 2 people wrote this. But book 2 might be better. I've read some pretty bad first novels, but the authors tended to become more competent as they gained more experience in writing. That's not what happened here. Oksa Pollock, The Forest of Lost Souls, is the worst book I have ever read, all categories combined. It felt like the authors had a list of every single possible mistake you can make when writing a novel and just tick them all off one by one. Plot holes, completely absent logic, characters that are so freaking stupid it hurts. I found out some stuff about this series since doing my last review. Apparently, only 4 out of the 6 novels in this series got translated into English. I don't know why. Is it possible that it didn't get the level of success the editors were hoping it would? Possibly. This is considered the French Harry Potter, and it's still sold in bookshops. Like, I still see the whole series alongside Harry Potter in bookstores in France. France has a strange relationship with homemade fantasy and sci-fi. I mean, there are brilliant sci-fi, like French sci-fi and fantasy writers out there, but they're not the ones that get to any kind of level of fame, and the ones that tend to be in the spotlight tend to be the worst possible ones. The other thing I found out was that this series has a sequel series which is all about Tugdual. Tugdual is the only character in this entire thing that I don't hate. He's the only one who has a few working brain cells. He's the only one who shows any kind of ounce of humanity, and he gets relentlessly bullied for it. I feel for you, Tugdual. So yeah, that's annoying because I was like, okay, I'm on book 3, so I'm almost halfway through, but apparently there's another 3 books after this. I guess that they're about Tugdual might make them better, but I also want to read them, so I'm in for the long journey here. I'm not done with this yet. So, to summarize all of this, Oksa Pollock is a 14-year-old girl living in London where her parents own a restaurant. She discovers one day that she has magical powers, and her parents explain to her that they are actually all from a magical land called Adifia, her grandmother being the queen of that land, and they've all been exiled when her enemy, Oreo McGraw, took over. I can't remember what his real name is, but let's call him Oreo. In the first book, she has to deal with Orphan McGraw, Oreo's son, and he is trying to abduct her or kill her. I'm not entirely sure which one. He tries to do both. Oksa is apparently the key to getting back to Adifia, so Orphan would want her for that. But he also tries to kill her a bunch of times. I don't know. He dies at the end of book 1. So yeah. In book 2, Oksa's best friend Gus gets sucked into a magical painting left in their science lab by their teacher, Orphan McGraw, and a lot of the book is just them going in to rescue him. And it turns out Orphan McGraw's not dead, and Oksa's mother gets abducted by the felons, Orphan McGraw's crew, and then the world starts to end in an apocalyptic series of floods, earthquakes, volcanoes going off, typhoons, tsunamis, you name it, because Adifia is acting up for some reason. So at the end of book 2, they flee from London because sea levels have risen by 3 meters. So the whole of the south of the UK is being flooded, which makes sense. Remember this, however. Remember the 3 meters, which I think is about 9.5 feet, water rising, because that would have a lot of consequences on the world. But the authors forgot that. I'll get to that. So book 3 picks up pretty much where book 2 left off. They are fleeing London on the back of Pavel, who is Oksa's dad, who can turn into a dragon. Why and how he can do this? Just don't ask questions. Just don't. They get spotted by a helicopter, and which starts firing at them, but Oksa deflects the bullets Matrix style, and she's like, oh my god, how did I do that? Because yeah, she's got like little to no magical training at this point. After that, they arrive at Leomido's home in Wales, which apparently is like a lot higher above sea level, so it's not affected by the flooding. And they're all really sad because Leomido dies at the end of book 2. For some reason. The thing about killing off characters is it needs to be done for a reason. Leomido had no purpose in this series apart from providing us with some character background and trivia, which has little to no relevance with the story, apart from explaining why some of the other useless characters were born in the first place. So yeah, it's basically page fillers. Obviously, the first consequence of a character dying is that the reader is going to feel some kind of emotion. Usually sadness, but in order to do that, you have to actually care about the character in the first place, which wasn't the case for Leomido because he didn't really do anything apart from just be there, which is true for a lot of characters in this series. The second thing is, what are the effects on the world of a character dying? If you take Ned Stark from Game of Thrones, for example, his death has an awful lot of consequences. His son Robb Stark is elected king in the north and goes and fights a war. His wife Catelyn goes into a spiral depression and eventually goes insane. Sansa is now at the mercy of Joffrey Baratheon. Arya's left her own devices. A whole war starts just because one man got his head chopped off. There are no consequences to Leomido's death in this book, apart from the characters are all a bit sad. They're a bit sad. They're sitting around his home and they're like, oh, it's sad he's not here anymore. And that's it. That's all you get. So while they're all sitting around, Oksa is looking over to Gus, who is sulking and not wanting to talk to her, and I can't remember why. He does this kind of thing a lot. He is a horrible, tedious character who spends a lot of time sulking and whining, and I hate him. And in book 2, he fell down a ravine, and I wish they'd just left him there, because he's tedious. Oksa sees this kind of ghost version of herself leave her body and go over to Gus and comfort him, and she's like, wow, how did that happen? Meanwhile, Tugdual is like, people, instead of like sitting around and relaxing, maybe we should talk about the fact that the world is ending and how we're gonna fix that. And obviously they listen to him and say, I made that joke way too often in my previous review. They tell him to shut the fuck up because God forbid they have to think about anything negative. The motto of what I am from now on going to be referring to as the Pollock cult, not the Pollock clan, is what could possibly go wrong. So yeah, anyway. After this, Oksa has a conversation with Dragomira about the ghost version of herself. And Dragomira's like, yeah, it's like a really rare power that the first queen of Edithia had. And Oksa's like, how do I deal with it and control it? And Dragomira's like, yeah, you'll figure it out. You can talk to snakes and make glass disappear. Yeah, you're probably a wizard. Oh, you'll need this. How does it work? Yeah, you'll figure it out. Hogwarts? Nah, waste of money. Because what could possibly go wrong? So we're not talking about how she stopped a helicopter and a bunch of bullets with her bare hands. We're not going to talk about that, okay? Because that's the part I wanted to know about. After this, we are introduced to another 20 characters. because apparently there weren't enough useless characters up until this point. Helpfully, there is a family tree at the beginning of this book, which I'm actually very grateful for, because it does get very confusing having so many characters that just sit around doing nothing and just remembering who they are and why they're there, and okay, thanks for that. We're introduced to a new character called Kukar, who is Tugdual's cousin. And oh my fucking lord, this chapter. The chapter is called The Ice Queen. It's all about Kukar and how horrible she is. So she's just this mean girl who's, I think, about 16, and she's just really mean. Like, Oksa walks in and she's kind of staring at her like, oh. Like Mean Girls, but just way worse. So yeah, that happens. All the language describing her is incredibly negative. It's all about her being cold and distant and how evil she looks and just the negative vibe she gives off. When Tugdual walks in, she takes some very strange sadistic pleasure in lobbing a vase at him. And then she starts yelling about how what he did was devastating on her and her family, and how they all had to leave Finland because of it, and how his mother went into a depression and his father fled to go live on an oil rig in the North Sea. They start fighting and Tugdual grabs her hair. It gets pretty bad. The problem with this is that there are no consequences to any of this. Neither Tugdual nor Kukar express any remorse from what they did. Also, I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to be getting from Kukar. Is she supposed to be traumatized by what happened? Because her behavior doesn't come across as trauma, it comes across as sadistic torment. Like, she's being a bully, clearly. I get that, like, bullies can be victims of trauma. It happens a lot as a defense mechanism. But her entire behavior surrounding this just doesn't make any kind of sense. There's a scene in Downworld by Rebecca Phelps which does this only right. In this scene, the main character M is confronted with a boy called Kieran, whom she believes is responsible for her brother's death. Here we have a similar situation. Like, she has been through an intense amount of trauma and hurt, and she believes that Kieran is responsible for what happened. So obviously she has all this like inner anger and resentment and trauma, but how she deals with that is way more realistic than this. So in this scene, they have to confront each other. They're in a room together, and she hasn't spoken to him for a long time, so she has all this anger inside her. But the issue I have with Kukar and Tugdual is the second he enters the room, she just lobs a vase at him straight away. Like, she goes from 0 to 100. There's no kind of escalation in her emotions about how she's triggered when she sees him. It just, boom, that's it, vase, boom. But in this scene, we get actually an escalation from when she sees him, when she starts interacting with him, and when she finally blows up and attacks him over her brother's death. I stopped in my tracks and pulled my arm away. Stop ordering me around, Kieran. Be quiet, Em. No. You never went to visit him because you didn't miss him. But what do I expect anyway? Just stop talking. You're the one who pushed him in front of that train in the first place. Stop! Kieran slammed his palm over my mouth to stop me. And though I didn't think he meant to do it, the force of his hand pushed my whole body back against the wall. I gulped with shock. Kieran immediately pulled his hand away, and the look of surprise in his eyes made me think that he had scared himself more than me. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry. So in this scene, we get the escalation. It's a very rapid escalation. It just goes from Kieran asking her to leave to her, oh, but you never went to see my brother. This is all your fault. And then he does what Tugdual does with Kukar. He actually physically attacks her and instantly feels remorse for that because he acted out of anger. These are teenagers. They can't control their emotions yet. It makes sense to have this escalation and also to have the remorse that goes with it. And then they sit down and have a conversation about it. Do you think I'm a monster? No, he said, looking at me again. You think I am. I shook my head, but I couldn't deny it. A monster is exactly what I had been told Kieran was for the past 3 years. I'll tell you more, he continued, but not here. Someone else might be coming. Let's get our bikes. I'll take you home. She still sees Kieran as a monster. She still thinks that he may be responsible for her brother's death. But there has been a de-escalation, they've both calmed down, and now at least they're talking to each other about the events that are unfolding, which does not happen with Kuka and Tugdual. What happens later on is Tugdual is just sitting on a chair, I think, sulking, and Kuka is like being really superior on her chair in her corner. There's no conversation about it. They do this in front of everyone. They don't have to face any consequences for it. And so far, nothing has been said or done about this. So my question is, if Kuka acts this way on a regular basis, how is Tugdual the evil one in the family? Because her behavior is extreme. Another problem I have with this is it is just shoved in the reader's face. Here's this character and you're supposed to hate them. And I hate that. I hate being told what to think of a character, and they do that a lot. We are relentlessly told that Oksa is brilliant and amazing, and she's so kind, and you need to like her, without giving us a reason why. Like, there is nothing she does in the book that is interesting or brave or amazing in any way. Her behavior, she can actually be pretty mean. Like, there's no example of why she is supposed to be super kind and super friendly and why everybody loves her so much. It doesn't come across in the writing at all. So if you are going to say, oh, here's this character and you've got to like them, at least give me a good reason to. Like, justify that in the writing. It is possible to do that. In Priestess of the White by Trudy Canavan, the main character, Araya, is really kind and really compassionate. And she's a peace-loving, philanthropic, just all-round bundle of joy and kindness character. And that comes across in her behaviour in the novel. She wants to reconcile the priests and the Dreamweavers, even though they don't like each other. She's working to try and find peace. She goes and creates alliances with other races to try and benefit everyone. And she is just kind and sweet and nice, and there's no reason not to like her. But at no point is the reader actually told, you should like this character because she's so amazing. None of the other characters say this. They're just like, oh yeah, she's a priestess. And this is what she's like. And here you go. Or you could create a character and just give us a bit of ambiguity, like Kelsier in The Final Empire, for example, by Brandon Sanderson. He is... there's one side of him which comes across as being a philanthropist. He wants to free the Scar from slavery. He wants to abolish the evil rule of the Emperor. And he sets up a whole revolution to do this. But another side of him is maybe doing this for fame and glory and wants to go down in history as being a hero. So we know about his backstory, we know about his past, we know why he's doing what he does, but his actual motivation for doing this is discussed by the other characters, but it's never entirely made clear. He's not a perfect character, he has flaws, but he also does a great amount of good. He also does terrible things, he kills people, and he justifies this in his mind by saying, well, these are the ruling classes, they're all evil, even though Vin tries to convince him that that's not the case. So he's not perfect, he's flawed. Maybe he is doing bad things for a good reason. Maybe he's doing good things for a bad reason. We don't know. We're never told that. But as a reader, you're meant to just make up your mind about how you feel about this character. First of all, I loved him from page 1. But other people might not. They might think he actually is trying to be some kind of fabricated hero and go down for his own personal glory. And that's also true. So please, don't tell readers what to think of characters. Just present us with a character. This is them, this is what they do, and let the reader work it out. It is possible to do that even when you're 12 years old, which is the demographic at which this book is aimed. Another question I have is, Tugdual's dad is on an oil rig? what are the consequences of the 3-meter water rise? Has he been told that the world is ending? Has he been evacuated? Is he safe? Does anyone bother to ask about this? No. But moving on. Then, oh my god, yeah, there's this scene, this whole fucking chapter where Oksa is having a discussion with Barry the house elf. I did actually find out what these creatures were called in English, but I can't remember, and I can't be bothered to look it up, so we'll just go with house elves. And I'm calling him Barry, that's my personal name for him. He doesn't have a name in the novel, because the authors couldn't be asked. The thing about Barry is that he always, like all of these creatures, they always talk in this incredibly flowery, overblown way, and I struggle understanding what they're saying, even as a 32-year-old who is used to reading classics. I can't see a 12-year-old understanding what the fuck these characters are saying. I can't read you a bit of it because it's in French, but because I read this in French, but it's incredibly complex advanced language, and it just makes my head hurt. So he has this whole conversation with Oksa, where Oksa is essentially explaining that she is jealous of Kukar because she's known Tugdual longer than her. Which makes sense because they're related. What I think the authors were going for here was to make her kind of resent Kukar for being a bigger focus of attention than her. Because obviously someone who's going to act up in the way she does is going to be the main focus of conversations, and maybe of Tugdual because he's the one who's directly involved with this. But the way she expresses this just makes it sound completely irrational. And again, there's a scene in Downworld that is very similar to this, only done right. In this scene, M is mad at a girl called Piper who has disappeared. So there are pictures of her all over the town. People are looking for her. They've had interventions at school from psychiatrists who are saying, look, if you need to talk about this, if you're traumatized, you can come to us and talk about it. So this girl, Piper, has disappeared, which is terrible. And nobody knows where she is, which again, kind of scary. But M really hates her in this particular moment because she's getting all the attention. And the thing is, she saw Piper getting on a train, so she knows that Piper's not dead. She knows that something's not happened, something terrible's not happened to her because she saw her leave willingly. So she knows that Piper's alive, that she's okay, that she's not been abducted, like everyone's saying, but Kieran has told her not to talk about this. Piper is Kieran's girlfriend, by the way. And she obviously wants to. She wants the Kyle to say, wait, stop losing your minds over this. I think I know where this girl might be. But she's been made to promise not to talk about it, and she doesn't understand why. And being a teenager, she doesn't know how to deal with these emotions. So this is what we get. I suddenly hated Piper McMahon. I hated her for getting on that stupid train. I hated her sweet jacket. I hated her parents crying on the news and the cheerleaders who missed her so much. M's hatred for Piper is completely irrational. She doesn't know this girl. She's never talked to her or interacted with her in any way. All she knows is that she got on a train and now everyone's crying on the news because she's gone missing. Hating her is completely irrational. But it makes sense in this scenario. Because she's getting all the attention, everyone's talking about her. And she is stuck in this position where she knows something, but she can't express it. So it makes her feel angry, it makes her feel lost, it makes her feel confused, and all of this comes out in hatred. It makes sense. This is a 3-line long paragraph. We get an entire fucking chapter, and it doesn't work. Ugh! So after this, Oksa goes down to talk to Tugdual, who's sitting outside, and she's like, do you want to talk? And Tugdual's like, nah, I don't want to talk. And that's it. What was the point of this? Your guess is as good as mine. And the next morning, everyone is just flying and having fun, because apparently that's what you do when the world is ending. Oh yeah, and in the meantime, Dragomira who in my book is as bad as Orphan. Like, she hasn't killed anyone yet, but it's only a matter of time. In book 2, she used a 13-year-old boy as a screen to keep herself out of trouble. And yes, that 13-year-old boy nearly died. I hate her so much. She goes and requisitions a fisherman's boat. Why is this boat allowed to sail despite the rising sea waters and horrific storms? Again, none of this is mentioned. Also, we don't know how she got this boat. And the book doesn't explain it, because it's all like, yeah, we're not going to ask questions, and maybe you should, because this captain dude, who apparently the boat belongs to, we're told that she somehow got him to agree to hand over her boat, but we never actually see him again. What happened to him? As I say, I'm pretty sure she's as bad as Orphan. And she may or may not have killed someone. Fine. So then they all get on the boat and sail to the island where Marie is being held captive. Finally, we're actually going to save Marie, because like they spent pretty much a third of book 2 just sitting around waiting for stuff to happen. Oksa's opportunity to grab Tugdual, Gus, and Zoe, remember her, and go off and save her was a very big missed opportunity in my book, because a YA series where the main character just sits around waiting for the adults to tell her what to do is pretty boring. But that's just my opinion. The boat journey is tedious. There's a scene where they're looking at the lights on the coast, and oh, how lovely, all these coastal villages with all their little lights. Sea levels have risen by 9.5 feet. How the fuck are there still people living in coastal villages? Shouldn't they have been evacuated? Or I don't know. Oh. Anyway. Gus gets sick on the way and starts whining again. Someone just shoot him in the head, please. Put him out of his misery. Tiens, un chacha. Me. Hi, me again. So I'm filming this on a completely different day with completely different makeup and everything because my boyfriend came home and it was my turn to cook the dinner. Also, sorry if you can hear my like fan heater thing, but it's really cold in here right now and this is all I've got to heat this room, so sorry about the weird blowy noise going on. Also, I just want to say I started using Frank Provost products on my hair and I have to say the results are quite astounding. I've gone from having this outrageous mess of whatever to having something that actually resembles human hair, so great products. But anyway, to pick up from where I left off, we're on the boat, the magical animals are making a fuss, they're all arguing and like fighting with each other. I will say this for Plichota and Worf, they did get the magical animals right. They do all have very distinguished personalities and very distinguished ways of talking. I could tell which ones were talking, like, without having to be told. What I do object to in this scene is it is a 4-page long wall of dialogue, and yeah, it goes on for way too long. Like, I get that this is supposed to provide some kind of comedic break, but still, it's kind of grating. So Abakum sprays them with a magical spray that makes them take their minds off what's going on, so they all quieten down, calm down, and just go to sleep. And then he's like, oh, this reminds me of something else. And he goes over to his, like, special kit, opens it up, and hands Oksa a magical pellet. So they don't have wands in this universe, they have blowpipes, which is horrendously disgusting in my opinion, but okay. So they blow on the pipe and they have these different pellets inside them, which they can then use to perform whatever spell they need, fine. And he gives her this pellet, telling her that it has like a specific psychic effect on whoever it's used against. However, he hasn't finished testing it. The reason for this is it appears to have different effects depending on what kind of magic the person it's aimed at possesses, because depending on what bloodline they're from, they all have different kind of powers. So he knows the effects it has on some of them, but not all of them. And he is giving this completely untested product, which could potentially have devastating and life-threatening effects, to an untrained 14-year-old. Yay to Abakum. Pavel obviously objects to this, and he's like, no, I don't think this is a good idea, and Abakum just instantly shuts him down. I feel really bad for Pavel. Like, I don't like him as a character, but I kind of feel sorry for him because he is Oksa's dad. He is the one person who should have authority over her, who should decide what she gets to do, what she doesn't get to do, and he is always getting undermined by Abakum and Dragomira. And in book 2, we get a sense of how frustrating this is to him and how much anger this causes in him, which is completely understandable. He is essentially seeing all authority over his daughter being ripped out from under him, and Oksa being used as a glorified key. As the mother of a 13-year-old, I would also object to my kid being used in this way. Unfortunately, this doesn't, like, nothing is really made of this in book 2. He just blows up against Dragomira at the end and becomes really irrational, which I thought was really unfortunate because Pavel does appear to be some kind of genius. In book 2, we find out that he apparently managed to learn the secrets to martial arts in a few months, which is honestly quite an achievement. And in this book, he's the one driving the boat. And Oksa walks in on this and she's like, oh, I didn't know you had any kind of naval experience. And he's like, I don't, I just saw someone else do it and copied them. Whilst I'm sure that that is possible for certain things, I doubt that it's true for maritime charts and navigating a whole fucking ship. But who am I to judge? Pavel, a man who can learn the secrets to all of martial arts in a few months. I'm sure he can do this. Unfortunately, his blowing up at the end of book 2 was incredibly irrational, and so I lost all respect for him. I still feel sorry for him though. Like, he has no reason to have his authority taken away from him this way, but he has to stay because Marie has been abducted and he needs these people to save her. And then Gus comes in again, suffering from atrocious seasickness, and Oksa's like, oh, I have the perfect solution. So she grabs the spray that Abakum used on the magical animals. A few pages after he told her that he doesn't know what kind of effect this specific type of magic has on different magical people or non-magical people like Gus, but she doesn't care and just sprays him in the face with it, regardless of the consequences. Yeah, if we've learned one thing about Oksa during this series, is she really doesn't give a shit about the consequences of her actions, even when she does terrible things like potentially destroy a whole neighborhood with her anger-induced storms. Speaking of which, there's a scene where she goes outside and then she faints and sets off a storm, which leads to a shit ton more questions about how does this fucking magic work? In book 2, they made a very strong case about the storms being set off when she's angry, but in this scene, she doesn't get angry, she just faints. And then a storm happens, while they're in a ship, at sea, in the middle of an apocalypse. What could possibly go wrong? When she wakes up, someone actually says, oh, maybe we should teach her to control this. Finally, someone with a bit of sense. But Dragomira swipes in, shuts them down, and is like, nah, it can wait. Dragomira's got an agenda, I swear. She is the real evil person in these novels. The other scene that I thought was actually quite interesting was one where she's outside with one of Leomido's other sons. I think his name is Camille. And they're having a conversation about Tugdual. And he says that he thinks that Tugdual shouldn't be held responsible for whatever the hell he did when he was 13. Which brings the number of people with functioning brain cells in this series up to 2. The other one being Tugdual. How much fucking common sense do you lack to not be able to see that a 13-year-old boy who has magical powers but was never warned about them isn't entirely responsible? Like, obviously he made decisions that led to terrible things happening, But all of this could have been avoided had his parents just sat him down and be like, kid, when you hit puberty, you might start finding that you can walk through walls. And to make up for their failings with their teenage son, they decided to shift the responsibility onto someone else. So he gets to live with his grandparents who treat him abominably, who just fucking hate him. Everyone just hates him. He's 16, for God's sakes. Like, I don't know how they expect him to grow up into anything close to a properly functioning human being if they are just going to treat him like scum all the way through his teenage years and not try and understand him or try and, I don't know, work with him or get him to go to therapy or anything that might actually help. Like, surely he's got trauma from what happened. His family clearly have trauma. I don't know what world these people live in, but they just don't care. Like, anything negative in their world is just shut down and just stamped on until they hope that Tugdual, I don't even know what they hope is going to happen with him. Like, these are supposed to be the good guys. They're supposed to be the ones helping him. And despite all of this, Tugdual is the more human one among them. So, yeah, I don't know. I just don't know. We haven't heard anything new about Kukar apart from this random conversation that Tugdual has with Oksa on the boat where he's like, oh, I'm really worried about my dad who's on an oil rig. Like, he doesn't mention the fact that the world is ending and that nobody knows where he is, whether he's been warned, has he been rescued. What are the consequences of the fucking 3 meter sea levels rising on the 200 plus, I think, oil rigs in the North Sea? Did anyone care to bother even asking this question? No. So that happens. There's another conversation with Zoe where she bigs up Oksa again, reminds her how wonderful she is. Okay. Until finally they get to the flipping islands where Marie is held captive. Now, what are the consequences of the sea levels rising by 3 meters on this island somewhere in Scotland? I don't know. I looked up the bit about London, and as far as I can tell, most of the Scottish Isles would be underwater, but apparently this one is fine. Like, have the sea levels gone down in the meantime? Like, what is going on? So I thought that this was going to be a big battle scene where, like, Abercoon would give them some kind of motivational speech and they would all charge out onto the beach to meet the felons and there'd be a big battle and they would fight their way to Marie. But no, that's not what happens. They get off the boat with no opposition whatsoever. They just walk off, and there's a scene where Dragomira walks off with this person called Jeanne. And when I read this, I was like, hold on, who the fuck is Jeanne again? And it took me a moment to remember, oh yeah, it's Gus's mum. There's so many useless characters just floating around. I can't keep track of all of them. She has done nothing to contribute to this novel, apart from raising a horrible, obnoxious, self-centered, snotty teenager. So yeah, I don't care. I don't care about her. There's basically, I don't even remember who she was. So then Dragomira grabs, I think, Reminiscence and Oksa and a few other people that I don't care to remember who they are, and they just walk up to the felon's stronghold. I was going to say without opposition, but Orphan actually kind of comes out at one point on the roof and sets off his deadly insects on them with no consequences at all. Like, no one gets bitten, no one gets hurt. They just, oh my god, there's a bunch of insects and that's it. And then they walk into the stronghold. They just open the door and walk in. Like, what the fuck is going on? So when they get in there, they are met by Mercedica. Remember her from book 2? She was Dragomira's best friend and she betrayed them and turned out she was working with the felons. So she greets them by presenting them with Mortimer, Orphan's teenage son, who went to school with Oksa in book 1. And she's like, look, Reminiscence, this is your nephew. Don't you care about him? And poor Mortimer's like, what do I have? What did I do? Why am I here? Like, he's not, but he should be. Like, wow. And then Reminiscence pulls a handkerchief out of her pocket and she's like, I care about him as much as I care about this handkerchief. And she, like, tears it to shreds and everyone's like, oh! What did Mortimer do to deserve this kind of treatment? Like, this whole family, like, the Pollock cult and the felons seem to be all about abusing teenagers. Like, poor kids. So then they walk into the living room, and I don't know why, they just sit down and have tea or something. So the whole point of this, obviously, is to create a diversion so that Pavel and Gus's dad and some other people can sneak around the back and free Marie. How the felons don't see that this is a diversion and like put ultra protection on Marie's room is kind of confusing to me. Like, why would their enemies just walk into their stronghold? And why are they parading Oksa around like this? Like, she's supposed to be super precious, and the felons are trying to abduct her / kill her, and they're just walking her straight in. I'm trying to understand you. I'm trying. So Pavel and the others get to Marie's room, and one of her healers is there, and she's like, no, please don't hurt the healer. She's been really nice to me. Because she has. Honestly, she's been like the Goblin King to Sarah in Labyrinth. Like, he was a way better babysitter than she was. Like, you know, he took the kid to a party, they sang songs with him. So good. Such a good caregiver. Marie also is in a place with people who clearly don't want to harm her and are intent on healing her from a disease that only they have the cure for. The alternative being Dragomira and her schemes with her 13-year-old daughter. I can't say I blame her. And so they do kind of fight their way into the stronghold, and then the real fighting starts in the living room for some reason, because they've just been sitting there throwing like acidic words at each other, which is always what they do. Like, the default setting of all of these characters is just to throw provocations at each other. That's it. That's how they function. So they actually do start fighting, and Oksa once again uses the acid creature to kill an animal. Yeah, I didn't miss that. And then there's an interesting scene where Pavel gets caught up, I think, in a sort of tornado by Orphan, and Oksa, who's been told not to get involved with the fighting, decides to step in and save her dad. So she kind of does something that rips him out of the tornado and saves his life. And he starts scolding her, and he's like, why did you do that? I told you not to get involved, and blah, 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 blah. This would have been the perfect moment for Oksa to at least start her emancipation from these people. Halfway through book 3, but better late than never. There's a great scene in Rogue Wave by Jennifer Donnelly. This is the second book in the Waterfire saga, where a character called Neela, who has been pampered her entire life, she's been treated just like the perfect princess, kept in a room, fueled with sweets to suppress all of her anxieties and desires, and just kept in this lovely pink fluffy world where everything's nice and don't worry about anything horrible and negative, exactly like the Pollock cult. However, once she finds out that there is a horrible, very dangerous, destructive demon that's going to destroy the world, she takes this information to her parents, and they're like, yeah, you're insane. We'll just lock you in your room until you decide to not be insane anymore. So she escapes, and this is the moment where she's like, you know what? Everyone's been making decisions for me my entire life. Now I'm going to start making my own decisions. And she does this. And she is prepared to deal with the consequences. And she does exactly what Oksa does. There's one of her companions is in mortal danger. She can save him. She's told not to, but she decides to anyway. So she goes back in despite what everybody says, pulls him out of danger, and she gets scolded for it. But unlike Oksa, who just resorts to self-pity, this is what she has to say for herself. Neela and Ikran hurried to the mouth of the cave. Basra and the others were waiting for them there. Basra was furious. She grabbed Ikran with one hand and Neela with the other and swam hard and fast, yelling at Neela the whole way. Neela couldn't have cared less. Ikran was with them, alive. Point of all of this is that Neela is tearing herself away from her controlling parents, from her controlling family, who never let her make her own decisions. Now she's taking a step into independence. Oksa should be doing this because so far she has done nothing but just wait for the adults to tell her what to do. And now she just acts confused. She's like, Dad, I just saved you. Why aren't you grateful? And self-pity, self-pity, self-pity. And then after the fighting has been going on enough for quite a few people to sustain some potentially serious injuries, the Ancient Ones arrive. Remember them from book 2, the ones who are like uber high on gossip? So these are sort of deities from Adefia, and they're supposed to like know everything that's going on and like know the future and stuff. They're kind of like oracles. However, they didn't bother to tell the Pollock cult that the world was ending in book 2. They just explained to them why Liamido died, which honestly wasn't that interesting. And here they just pop up and like, hey, you should stop fighting and start working together because you need each other. And they're like, okay, yeah, fine. And then Dragomira says something that honestly blew my mind. She says yes, so that she agrees with this because she knows where the portal is to go back to Adefia. So she is indispensable to getting back to Adefia. And then she says that Orthan is the key to getting back to Adefia. I thought Oksa was the key. Isn't Oksa the key? Like, isn't that the whole point of her? Isn't that her sole purpose in these books? To be the key to get back to Adefia? To be the, like, hope giver or whatever? Like, what's going on? I'm trying to understand you. I'm trying. If she isn't the key, you can write her out of these novels quite easily. The novels that she is named after. I don't know. And then it turns out that Gus isn't suffering from seasickness. He's actually suffering from the after effects of the poisonous insect that bit him back in book 1, and he's dying. Again. Just let him die. How is he still alive? Of all the characters in this novel, he is probably the most pointless one of all. So just let him die. Just let, oh, he's gonna suffer. Yeah, okay. Just let him get on with it. Just, yeah. But no, obviously they're like, oh, please, Orthan, you're the only one who can cure him. Please cure him. And Orthan's like, okay. So then we get this like succession of chapters where we get more pointless revelations about characters who have little to no consequence in these books. Honestly, this whole series feels like Plutchota and Wolf are just putting stuff in it that they have seen in other novels. Like, they know that you can have lots of characters in a novel, but they don't understand how to use them. They know that you can give them backstories, but they don't understand why you would do this. And they know that you're supposed to give exciting and dark revelations about characters, but they have no idea why this is done. It is useful to have a revelation about a character when it serves the plot, when it, I don't know, creates drama or tension or moves the plot along or gives us information about a character that is actually useful to explain how they got to where they are at this point. This serves no fucking purpose whatsoever. Or we learn something about Gus's dad and that he's related to someone else, because everyone is fucking related in this book. Like, look at the fucking family tree at the beginning. It's so insanely long. There's like all of these people are related, and Gus and his parents aren't even on it. And this was the point where I stopped reading because I was like, I can't deal with this. My last remaining brain cell just jumped off a cliff, just went, boop, that's it. I can't deal with this anymore. Let's just go and read something else. So I want to have hope for the second part of this novel. I want to have hope that it's gonna start making sense, but given what I've seen so far, I don't think it's gonna change. I mean, it's not getting worse, I guess. I mean, it's difficult to do worse than this, but it's not getting better either. And it makes me sad because, you know, like I said, this is still hailed as like the Harry Potter of France. This is one of the best-selling fantasy series in France ever, like French fantasy series. And there are so many better ones out there, like YA series. You've got the Ileana series that I've talked about before. It's not perfect, it's flawed, there's a lot of things wrong with it, but it's still way better than this. It's got characters who actually do things, who are actually inspiring, who are interesting. And when you get revelations about them, it actually makes sense. It serves the plot, it matters. Isabelle Meyer, who wrote it, is a competent writer. Another one is the Autremont series by Maxime Chatham. I've only read book 1 of this series, but I want to read the rest of it. It looks really good. It appears to be really good. What I've read of it, Maxime Chatham is a very competent author. I've read other novels by him, and I haven't been disappointed. What? The door's open. You can come in. We have a crying cat. Can you come? Come on then. Come on. You're my big girl. You come and say hello. Come in. Come and say hello. Come and say hello. Oh, you're so beautiful. You're so fluffy. Aren't you so fluffy? Look at you. Oh, sorry. This cat is 18 years old and it has a pretty hefty temper. So yeah, that's it for my rant review of the 3rd novel in the Oksa Pollock series, the first half of the 3rd novel. I hope you enjoyed this. I didn't, but I don't know, something is compelling me to continue doing this madness that is reviewing the Oksa Pollock series, potentially the worst YA fantasy series at least I have ever read. So yeah, I'll see you for part 2 at some point when I can wrestle my brain into submission and read the second half of this. So I guess I'll see you then, and I'll see you for the next video. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.